Hi guys, okay, so 3 Peridot, as I promised you, I have marked and returned back the GI worksheet. I'm going to use this as a good chance to revise a bit on GI question types. Actually, we've already done one round, so this is more of a revision to the revision. Still worthwhile, I still would like you to do your corrections so that at least you can learn from the mistakes that you've made. Keeping in mind if the exam question were to come out something similar, at least you've already have learned from it. And even if not, likely it won't be exactly the same. At the very least, you know what are the different types of question and how they can be assessed. Because keep in mind, you're not just learning for your end of year exam, but also for your national exam. Okay, so let's start off with the first question. You see, I already pre-populated 4 response here. Okay, if you take a look at this question, the students want to investigate if the distance from the center near the town council is better or worse quality of services compared to nearer to the boundary. So the story is already there. Simply put, the variables are also clear. Distance from the center or distance from the town council or distance from the boundary and the quality of the service. So this one, most of you got the hypothesis right. Most, not saying all, not an issue. Because most of you wrote down this second statement. The further the distance from the center, the worse the quality of town council services. So yeah, sure, that's fine. Okay, you realize this is a mathematical relationship. If you imagine this as a graph, it will be a scatter graph. But it need not always be that case, right? It doesn't necessarily say it has to be like, oh, you increase by 1 meter, quality worse by 5%, another meter, quality worse by 2%, right? It could just be a comparison, which is why some of you still got the mark for this hypothesis number 1. Town council services are better, so this is a compare type hypothesis. Okay, so what I would like you to do as you're recording this down, you're listening to this, I'd like you to please record down both so that you can see that there are 2 ways to phrase a hypothesis. Sometimes one is more relevant than the other. Sometimes both are equally correct. So you need to know when to apply or when to just say, hey, both are okay, so don't stress about it. Okay, so the second one just now, as we already talked about, that's a mathematical relationship. And the first one, this is a compare type hypothesis. So there's one, however, a limitation for this compare type hypothesis that costed some of our classmates mark, where they wrote down town council services are better at the center of a region, full stop. Right? If this is a compare type hypothesis, you have to say compare to something. So better at this than what? So better there at the region, at the center of the region, than at the boundaries. So you need to have both sides. Then you can compare. Okay? So this is the hypothesis. So you can see, right, there are 2 parts to the question. Hopefully you've seen that. Actually, most of you did. Okay, for 2-mark question, with the word "and" here, one is a guiding question. Now, admittedly, this is something that I think one of you asked me this question. I think it was Mohundan who asked me this question. What's the difference between this and a research question? It's actually my bad. This should have been a research question because your syllabus doesn't have a guiding question. Okay, so you're looking for a research question. And a research question, as you are already familiar with, research question is meant to be open-ended, right? It's not meant to be predictive. It's meant to tell you that there are multiple things that could possibly happen. You have to figure it out. Okay, so let's take a look at this third response, which some of you wrote down, which admittedly is wrong. So let's try to find out why is it wrong. Take a look at this. It's trying to give me a research question. Does the town council quality of service worsen as the distance from center of region increase? Sounds good, right? Like it's like a direct comparison to point number 2 here, right? You just phrase it as a question instead. However, not everybody is going to get the marks for this. Actually, most of you who wrote down this form, I wouldn't give the mark for it, because this means if you imagine the answer to this question, read the question. What's the answer? Yes. If not yes, no. Right? There's only 2 possible answers. How is that possibly open-ended? Right? For an open-ended, the correct answer will be the 4th one. How does distance from the center affect the quality of town council services? Okay, so this is the accepted response. Nevertheless, there's still people who wrote down this perfect looking response and then they forgot to put question mark. I'm telling you first, if the exam question come out, you don't put the question mark, you're just killing yourself, because there's no way I'm awarding the mark anyway. It's not like a mercy kind of thing. It's not a question if there's no question mark. Okay, so please make sure you look at the punctuation carefully. Okay, so point number 1, point number 2 would have been accepted. Point number 4 would also have been accepted. Let's move on. Next question. Determine which areas they research online. right? So they're not collecting data specifically from the respondents. They just go online to see what information there are. They look for reviews online, and then so just from the reviews itself, that's about it. Okay, so there's a problem with this in that it cannot give the best quality response because it's reviews, is what people say. The type of questions is not the questions that you would be asking, right? You look at the review, what do you think of this? So they just write whatever they want. So you don't get a chance to scope down the question for them. So what's the problem with it? It means that you don't get the level of accuracy that you want to answer the questions exactly the type of questions that you want to ask them, but there is still a value to it. Which is, alright, for now, let's take a look at the question. Again, 2 marks. You see, right, this time? There's an N here as well, so it splits the question. Identify the type of data collection. Now this one, quite a lot of you wrote down qualitative data. Wrong. Yeah, outrightly just wrong. The fact that you're getting responses, well, one of you wrote down interview. Wrong. You're reading online. This is called secondary research. Yeah? So please remember this point. Don't kill yourself. Remember that there's this thing called secondary research. You don't have to do the research, you just read whatever that's available online, which has its advantage, which is that it is readily available. Oh, readily available. Okay, and this is something that most of you have written, right? But if you stop there without an elaboration, I didn't give you any mark. So what if it's readily available? It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. You need to argue your point to show that this is an advantage. Remember the scope. You have to prove that this is an advantage. So the fact that it's readily available means you can have a larger sample size from multiple sources. It could be more representative. So there's a lot of ways that you can elaborate from this where you can show that this is a good thing, right? Sorry, excuse me. So as we move on, next question, they published a Google form. So now instead of relying on what other people have asked, now as a Google form, you decide the question. So this is considered primary data, even though it's online. Okay, please remember, as long as you get to shape it, you get to collect the data, this is considered primary data. Okay, even though this kind is, in this case, it's not, unfortunately, face-to-face. Okay, which is something that a lot of you are actually writing down, that if it's an online form, you cannot verify the accuracy of the response because you cannot ask further. And I completely agree with it. However, let's continue reading the question. Right, first, they're using a Likert scale. Some of you are writing down Likert scale is good because blah 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 blah. Okay, they are talking about address, so they're asking for address. They are asking for 20 residents in each of the 4 towns. Now, my question is, it's not asking about accuracy, it's asking about reliability. Now, this is something I've already revised that I want to repeat again. Reliability is about whether is it representative. Will you be capturing an anomaly? Are all groups represented? Are the sample size big enough? Did you use sampling? Is there any bias in your selection of the respondents? Right? So this is all about reliability. Everything else is considered accuracy. Okay? So accuracy is things such as you ask in a language that people don't understand, so they just anyhow hantam, or they get tired answering, so they just anyhow hantam, right? They just anyhow do, so this means it's not accurate. Yeah, some of you are writing down the fact that you cannot verify, therefore it's not accurate, which is good, which is true, but it's not answering the question because question is on reliability, hence you didn't get the mark. So where would the marks go to in this case? Reliability is you saying the fact that, and I think some of you are able to revise and you see, less than 30 is considered too small a sample size. In this case, there are 80 respondents, right? 20 residents each of the 4 towns. So there's 80 respondents. So this is reliable. Reliability plus positive. It's a good thing, right? They're able to capture a large enough sample size. Oh, keep in mind, sorry, I didn't say this. Command word is explain, so you have to elaborate. This is just evidence. You need to elaborate. Okay, so large enough sample size, you're more likely to capture different perspectives, therefore it's more representative. Okay, if you need to rewind, please rewind. I'm not elaborating, I'm not writing this down, okay? Next part. What other things can you talk about? So there's an address to map it out. So you can represent the different parts of a region. Again, representative. Third, the fact that it's 4 different towns is better than having 1 town, which could have been anomaly. Okay, so with these in mind, this means that the research is actually quite reliable. Yeah, I know that there's no right or wrong, not saying there's no right or wrong, but that I've only painted the positives in this story. Right? If you can come out with a negative, I mean, it's not like you're going to lose the mark. Yeah, but in this case, because the story is mostly positives, therefore my expectation is to say that yes, the research is reliable. Okay, so let's move on. Next question is talking about data analysis. Remember the scale of the type of question, the sequence of the type of question I can ask you. Okay, it could be about hypothesis and research question, data collection, and now we're moving on to data analysis. Now data analysis, the one that I mentioned to you, is very simple. You can calculate mean, median, and mode, right? You can calculate percentage, maybe percentage change, whatever it is. Yeah, so those are the forms that you can do for you to press calculator. Okay, median and mode, maybe not press calculator lah, but you know what. But in this case, my question is not asking you to calculate. Rather, I ask you how the students get that value. Right? Most of you who wrote down average or you wrote down mean means you have identified the step. You got a mark. There's no way you can score full marks. What I'm expecting to see is you sum the scores, you add total, you sum the scores, and then you divide by, please don't write divide like this, you write in proper sentences lah. Okay, so you divide by the number of residents, number of respondents living 50 meters from Bedok Town Council. Okay, some of you are very astute. You read this question, you see the word how, you know this is asking for a process. So you end up writing how to get an average value. You write down, add the total scores together and then divide by the total number of respondents. Once you divide by 80, it's no longer relevant for you to get 4.3. To get 4.3, you only need to divide by this many people. It could be 5, it could be 8, it could be 2. You don't know. So this is the reason why you need to come up with this kind of response. This is how you get 2 marks. 1 mark is for you to say you calculate the total. Second one is you divide. But you must specify divide by this. If otherwise you only get 1 mark. Okay? And if you just identify instead of describe, I mean, it's not like you didn't get anything. You knew that it's 4.3 is an average, so you still got a mark. Okay? Moving on. This next question is talking about representation to best show relationship between distance from boundary and the scores. I super want to give props to, I think, 4 people. I remember Cheng Xuan, Chen Zi, I think Shara, I can't remember one more. I'm so sorry. I'm sure there's one more person was able to read this question and know specifically not just what are the variables, but the heck. I think there are total about 6 to 8 of you who can identify what's the variables here, which is distance from boundary and the scores. So, expecting to see, in this case, between the two of them, right? This is the independent variable. This is the dependent variable. Why? Because the score is dependent on how far they are from the boundary. Okay, so this is distance from boundary, and the y-axis should be the score. Okay, meaning if this distance from the boundary, this one should be what? Near town council, or you can say within 50 meters. Then the second one, and the last one, far and near boundary 1 km from town council. Okay, I'm not going to write properly. You're going to write down the rest yourself. Okay, so this is the correct axis. And if you write the correct axis, chances are you might have gotten 1 to 2 marks. Yeah. So the question then becomes, how are you going to plot? You imagine, okay, right now I didn't write down the total number of marks. I just want to let you unleash your creativity. In an exam setting, typically you're going to have about 3 marks for data representation. Okay, so imagine, oh my god, 3 marks. Are you going to genuinely draw Bedok, this one, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one, and then another one, and then after that you're going to need to shade them differently. Then you give the legend. Then this one, like that, and then legend, so legend, right? You can. And for those of you who did, I think Tarani did this, I think so, I can't remember lah. I best not to guess. I marked this over 2 days. Okay, so let's say for example you drew this, yes, you have gotten 3 out of 3, but take a look. Was the amount of effort commensurable to the number of marks? Remember I mentioned, for every 3 marks, you have 6 minutes for you to answer. Would you take 6 minutes to draw this? You could then take like 15 minutes to finish this type of graph, man. So what's the fastest way to go about doing this? Is actually not to draw a comparative bar graph. Now again, if say for example you are trapped, you don't know what to write, and you end up drawing the comparative bar graph, by all means, you have gotten the mark. Good for you. Okay? It's just that if say you are running out of time and you know you just want to answer the question, the actual fastest way to get the mark is not giving me the score. Rather, you take out your calculator, you determine what's the average score here. Average score, average score. So this one becomes average score. So it becomes just 3 bar. That's all. This one you've also gotten the mark. Same, 3 out of 3 as well. And you've taken less time for you to get the mark. Okay, so keep in mind, what is the question actually asking for? Does it say you need to have the data from all of the towns? If not, what does it actually ask for? It's just asking for a relationship. From this, can you see a relationship? Yes, you can. And you're done. Okay. Some of you plotted it as a scatter graph with line of best fit. I have also accepted. Bar graph in this case would have been better lah, just because of this thing is not actually mathematical. Right? These are just categories. So bar graph actually is the correct version of this. Okay. So let's move on to the last question in this part, this page, which is, does the information support the hypothesis? Now this was already a question that's being asked. This is a conclusion type question. So obviously the hypothesis is supported. Okay, as distance from center increases, the average rating decreases. I need evidence. Okay, evidence. It decreased from how much is this average and how much is this average? Okay, decrease from how much to how much? At 150 meters versus 1 km. No evidence, second point is gone. You can tell me back this whole relationship, right? You still won't be able to get the full second mark. Second point, I mean. Okay. And the third point here is an anomaly, which some of you actually admittedly skip. I mean, in an exam setting, if you cannot find an anomaly, of course lah, just skip lah, it's fine, won't die one, right? It's just 1 out of 3 marks. But your Cambridge examiner in the previous syllabus, again, yours is the first time, they haven't mentioned anything to us yet, much about this, but when it comes to anomaly, more often than not, like a 95% chance, they'll give you an anomaly in your data. Okay, in this case, what is the anomaly? Is this. See? Between the two of them, even though you travel further from the center, the value is exactly the same at 4. So by writing down this thing as an anomaly in sentence form, this is how you get the third mark. Alright? Okay, I'm not writing this down. You already heard this. Rewind if you need to. Let's move on to talking about the last page. Okay, so they talked about the interview with the residents and blah blah blah, and they did the interview and all that. Okay, so identify and explain the precautions. In this case, 3 marks. So you know you need to divide. So explain the precautions is 2 marks, identify is 1 mark. In this case, you don't identify 1 because this question says precautions. So you identify 2 precautions, you get 1 mark. Then after that, you explain each of the 2 precautions, you get the second and the third mark. Now the thing is, for most of you who wrote down, right, you just say in pairs so that you can look out for each other. Okay, well, I understand what you mean by look out for, right? I mean, we all understand each other, what does it mean by look out for. But it is an informal language. In an exam setting, you're submitting to Cambridge, the most formal or formal British. You imagine those people very uptight one, right? They're marking this, they're not going to accept informal language. So I'm actually expecting you to unpack. What do you mean by look out for? So in this case, what I'm expecting to see is to be able to seek help in the event one is in danger. Right? So when one is in danger, the other one can go ask for help. That's basically it. Yeah, I know it's quite dull. You say look out for what? Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't change the fact that you need to unpack. If you don't explain it, how am I going to give you the mark? Right? Second one, the fact that you're doing it at the void deck. Then you say, so that it is safer than at the person's house. I understand, it's true that it is safer, but why is that a safety precaution? Right? To prevent being kidnapped, for example. To prevent being kidnapped. If they had done this at the person's house. Yeah, so these are the kind of thing that you need to elaborate on. I know it sounds weird that I'm asking you for like mean things that might happen and you need to write about them, but that's basically what safety precaution is about, right? Like you don't say yeah, so just unpack them. Okay, the one thing that I find super cute is some of you are writing now, oh, they do this at the void deck so that they're not in the middle of a road where they might get run over by traffic. It's very funny, right? You're right. Unlikely scenario, right? So I didn't give the mark for that. Okay? So again, it's not just what you memorize in the textbook, you just rewrite. You need to apply in the context of what we're doing. If your research is going to be about counting the number of cars, then I agree wholeheartedly. But this is about interviewing people. Why would you interview them in the middle of a road? Okay? Second last question, talking about is it quantitative or qualitative in this case, because they did the interview, right? So the answer correctly is qualitative. Everybody managed to get that. Now the question is, what is the advantage? And again, you need to tell me, how is it an advantage? Right? Otherwise, you haven't yet fully answered the question. So, qualitative data, what's the advantage in this case is you get in-depth responses, right? You get to clarify your questions, you get to answer, you get to clarify if the respondents do not understand your questions. You get to probe deeper to find the reasons for their responses. There's a lot of things that you can write down, including things such as you can hear responses that you have not considered before for you to explore as a new possible approach to your research. The thing that unfortunately that some of you are writing, right, I think is you cut and paste from textbook maybe. I just say that, oh, because you can get unexpected responses. Get unexpected responses. And then after that, very cute, no? You know what happened after this? Put full stop. Then, what am I supposed to do? So what if you get unexpected responses? Is that really an advantage? Do you want to get unexpected responses? Shouldn't it be a disadvantage? So you need to be clear. Right? This could be a good thing. That's why you do qualitative research. It's good because when you do this means that you get to pursue a different avenue of research, a different angle in finding a conclusion. Right? This could be a very good thing. But by just leaving it at that, it's not an advantage, guys. And you have to elaborate. Okay, so I think this befell 4 to 5 of you, actually quite sizable. Okay. Lastly, similarly, as I mentioned, this is a conclusion type hypothesis. The only difference is this is based on the story in part 2, which is here, and this is asking about qualitative data. So how do you conclude from it? So in this case, actually, same 3 things. Is it supported? Yes, it's supported. So point number 1, supported. Of course, you write a proper sentence, please. Okay. Then you can say what's the evidence? Because the cleaning block frequency was poorer in areas nearer to the boundary. This is the evidence, right? However, there's the anomaly where these 2 things were comparable. Or you can also say as point, so this is point number 2. Point number 3, an alternate is that there are people who responses who were dissatisfied but did not want to sound too negative. Yeah, so there are multiple anomalies you can talk about. This is the most straightforward one. So I phrase it in a way that's easier for you to identify. Again, keep in mind, this is not your exam. Exam will predict this to be a bit more complex than something so straightforward as a practice. Okay? Alright, so that's that for this. Hopefully this 24-minute video has been helpful for you. Please make sure this is not the be-all and end-all of your revision. Alright? Have fun revising, guys.